Hi guys, how are you? Everybody good? Stuck at home? All right. So I am the anchor mentor for this group. I did this last cycle, which means this I'll probably won't be on next year. And one of these four mentors will be doing that are here up here with me will be doing it next year, and they'll be the anchor mentor. But we all want to be a resource for you, and we all want to be here to help you. And you should feel free to ask any of us questions, and you should feel like we're here to be a resource for you long term. And so please know that Vassar is a family that extends far beyond the this one weekend. It's something that matters to you for life, and each one of these mentors and I really take that to heart because we wouldn't be here trying to help you grow your careers if we didn't truly believe that. So long term, I just want to set the stage that this is a safe space to ask whatever you want to ask, and it doesn't even necessarily need to apply to the government panel. Please feel free to talk about career questions or things that you may be unsure of or how to break into certain things. We want to be a resource long term. With that, why don't we talk about government and public service? So my name is John Kane. I graduated in 2002. I started my career on Capitol Hill actually while I was going to Vassar. My junior year, I got to go in a program called Junior Year Away. And instead of going abroad to Europe, I went to Washington, D.C., and I did an exchange program with American University. At American University, did an internship, and a month into the internship, the member I was working for in the Senate hired me. At that time, uh, politics were very different. It was much more bipartisan and people worked across the aisle. I was interning for a Republican. They knew I was a Democrat when they hired me, and that kicked my career off. And 20 years later, here I am still working on Capitol Hill, and I work for Democrats now on a different committee. And so, just a little bit of background for what I do. I am the Water Policy Staff Director on the Environment and Public Works Committee. I oversee the staff for the chairman of the committee that deal with drinking water, wastewater, Army Corps of Engineers, flood protections. A lot of my job is about environmental justice and making sure people have access to clean, safe, and reliable drinking water sources, also helping people recover after emergencies. But also part of my job is about trying to get the government to be more proactive and really investing in measures to stop disasters from happening when we have major problems like a snowstorm or a hurricane like what hit Puerto Rico. Also work on hazardous waste and recycling issues, as well as a number of homeland security and governmental affair issues. At this point in my career, I really manage people more than get involved in the direct policy myself. That said, I do carry a couple policy portfolios. And in fact, I wrote the last two major water infrastructure bills that went through Congress that have really invested in significant help for drinking water, wastewater, and flood protection. With that, that's sort of just a little basic of my career. But I'm happy to talk about a lot of different things, and I've worked on issues all across the board, and I'm sure all of my colleagues up here on the panel will have similar stories and be excited to talk to you too. Why don't we pass the baton over to my colleague Brooke, who has a similar background, and we'll just work down the line in terms of mentors from there.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Brooke Gesser. I'm a senior advisor to U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. She's the junior senator from New York. And it turns out that John and I know a lot of people in common on Capitol Hill. We very recently discovered. I don't work on Capitol Hill anymore. I work for Senator Gillibrand in her New York City office, though these days I work for Senator Gillibrand out of my Brooklyn living room. And I work on a whole bunch of issues for the senator. My main issue that I work on is health and healthcare. I also work on aging issues, arts and cultural affairs, education, LGBTQ issues, and youth issues. And really, aging and health take up almost all of my time, though I would be very happy if I could do nothing but arts and cultural affairs. all day. So I worked for Senator Gillibrand in her Capitol Hill office for 3 years before I moved out to New York City. And there on Capitol Hill, I worked on mostly military policy. And my main issue was women in the military. I wrote Senator Gillibrand's bill on ending sexual assault in the military, which has become one of her signature bills. And though we're still trying to get it passed, and it's been a while now. And I worked on issues such as maternity leave in the military, body armor that better fits women, breastfeeding in the military, all sorts of amazing issues that have to do with women in the military. And it was really, really interesting. I also have a law degree. I have a very weird career trajectory that kind of looking back makes no sense. And it's very, very lucky, I think, that I landed in a career that I love and a job that I love, because for a while there, I was very lost and confused. So I'm happy to take any questions about feeling lost and confused, that's for sure. So I'm really looking forward to speaking with all of you. Thanks.
And why don't we move on to Tom, my colleague from the class of 2009.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Thomas Szymański, and I'm a special agent with the FBI. As a special agent, my mission is to uphold the US Constitution and protect the American people. And specifically, I investigate national security matters related to international and domestic terrorism. So what that means is my team and I proactively pursue threats and use our full legal authority to prevent essentially bad things from happening to good people. And when acts of terrorism do occur, my team and I respond to mitigate those threats and also bring the perpetrators to justice under the letter of the law. In addition to that, I'm also a member of our evidence response team. And what the evidence response team does is respond to major crime scenes or national threats. Most recently, we responded to the Nashville bombing that happened on Christmas Day. And we used the latest forensic techniques and tools to gather evidence and process the crime scene. Before that, I worked on foreign policy matters for both USDA and Department of Labor here in Washington, D.C. And immediately after Vassar, I did 2.5 years in the Peace Corps in West Africa. My time at Vassar, I was a double major in sociology and political science, was on the rugby team. I was also a host on WVKR, fitness facilitator and research assistant in sociology department were my part-time jobs. So I, kind of like Brooke, had a very circuitous route to get to where I am today. So very happy to talk about, taking a little bit of time off after graduating, which is what I did through the Peace Corps to really find your way. I'm also happy to talk about some conceptions of law enforcement. I know a lot of times, me coming from Vassar, I was very suspect of the military and law enforcement, and lo and behold, now I'm a sworn member of law enforcement. And I know sometimes in the very liberal bubble that we're in, we have these conceptions that I'm happy to talk with you about because, it's true, kind of like John said, I think bipartisanship is a thing of the past. I mean, I hope it comes back, but working in government and working towards getting back to that place where we used to be, I think is an important thing to recognize. You all have an opportunity to be a part of, whether it's a public servant or in government in some kind of way. So with that, happy to learning more about your interests and very pleased to be here speaking with you today and into the future.
Thank you, Tom. Alex from the class of 2004.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alex Cawthorn Gaines, class of 2004. I'm currently a vice president at the Center for American Progress, where I oversee our anti-poverty work. Center for American Progress, just a little bit about that. It is a think tank. We produce research, advocacy campaigns, different products connected to different pieces of legislation. The think tank itself covers a wide range of issues, everything from international policy, national security, to climate, to criminal justice, and like I said, anti-poverty education, among other issues. In terms of my career path, when I was at Vassar, Brooke spoke about confusion. I certainly was. I actually started as a pre-med major. I knew I would, or pre-med biology major. I was never good at math or science, but I was dedicated to the idea of being a pediatrician from a very young age. And so that's what I pursued while I was at Vassar. Didn't have the best grades, and slowly realized that I actually didn't have as much interest as I thought, and became more interested in social science. So ultimately, I graduated with a double major in urban studies and psychology. And I similarly, actually, I did the same fellowship, or the same junior year abroad program that John did, mostly from a perspective of being interested in community service, social justice. And there was a program at American University that did focus on that, that I took advantage of. Came back to Vassar my senior year and had the best job on campus, which I think for a senior, which is actually the career development office, where I was able to see all of these different jobs coming in and get a sense of what's out there. I just felt very limited in my perspective of what is possible in a career generally. And grew up with people who were teachers, who also who we consider essential workers, just didn't have the widest range or set of ideas around what I could possibly be doing. And so one of the jobs that came across my desk when I was in the career development office was actually a fellowship, an anti-poverty fellowship through the Congressional Hunger Center, which was an amazing experience. You had to be a bit adventurous to do this program. They sent you someplace in the country. You had the option of region. That was about it. To do 6 months of service, directly working with the community impacted by poverty and hunger. And then they sent you for 6 months to DC to work for a think tank, The Hill, federal agencies, a number of different placements. I was sent to New Orleans. This is before Hurricane Katrina, where I had an opportunity to really develop connections to a community. I worked in one of the poorest communities in the city at that time, in a public housing area, doing some research work in a community-based organization that served people who were facing homelessness. So really had a wide range of relationships and connections to that community. It was inspired when I came to DC to do work on a level that would have an impact on the people that I met and served and became friends with when I was in New Orleans. And so in DC, I worked for the Poverty and Race Research Action Council as a fellow on housing insecurity issues, homelessness issues, and really followed that through most of my career up until more recently. After that, I did find myself on the Hill. It was an interesting situation because I didn't think of myself as someone who would necessarily do work that wasn't oriented in community, but went to, just out of curiosity, have an informational interview with a person who had worked for the Senate Banking Committee. And then when I went to that informational interview, they brought their boss with them and they offered me the job the next day that she was leaving. So I ended up working for the Senate Banking Committee on housing related issues for about 3 years. Then came to CAP as a junior staffer, the place I'm at now, the Center for American Progress. And then after that, spent 8 years at the National Governors Association. So another perspective and policy that I bring is at the state level, where National Governors Association being a bipartisan or partisan neutral organization, I served Republican and Democratic governors with a focus on driving good outcomes for children and families. My portfolio was human services related issues. So those are things like income support, food stamps, child welfare, foster care, adoption, all of those kinds of issues, which are deeply personal and important to me. So I feel like my career has been one where I've been able to bring my purpose, my personal purpose, passion, together with strong social science. And so, I've enjoyed, even though it's been sort of a confused journey at certain points, I've enjoyed where I've landed, and I'm happy to serve as a mentor, to answer questions about all the things that have come up, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I will probably be talking to you at some point to mentor me, because you have some things that you've done that I want to talk about in the long term. Next is Juan. Juan.
Hey, folks. Happy to be here. My name is Juan Bautista Dominguez. I graduated from Vassar in 2013. I had major in political science and then minors in international economics and Arabic. I played soccer at Vassar for 3 years. And I had a fantastic time. So I'm sure you all know this, but you're incredibly fortunate, and you should be really excited about what remains for you at Vassar, and certainly for the future as a graduate, as an alumni, and hopefully a mentor. You never know. So I am in broad terms, I am a public relations consultant. And what my expertise is strategic messaging, project management, and field operational logistics. Now, I specialize in campaigns, political campaigns, whether that's for public office or that is an advocacy campaign. And I've been doing this since 2015. And so I have mainly been focused on helping plan and manage and execute campaign trips and events. So any large rallies, presidential or other office campaign events you may see on TV, I'm usually behind the scenes helping plan those and execute those. And I got my start in 2015 with Hillary Clinton's campaign. And I was on that campaign. I focused on press logistics and operations, so mainly focused on the press component of campaign events. And then after that, I was a freelance consultant and did contract work for different campaigns, as well as nonprofits, NGOs, and advocacy campaigns. I've had the pleasure and really the fortune of being able to work abroad for NGOs, helping them put together trips for members of Congress or different executive agencies to survey and promote the work that they're doing abroad. I've been lucky enough to work for world leaders like Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Michael Bloomberg, and Tom Steyer. So been really lucky in that regard. I was very busy this last cycle. I first started working for Kamala Harris. I was a trip director for that campaign, and then I moved to Iowa to help her on her advanced shop in Iowa. When that came to an end, I jumped on Pete Buttigieg's campaign, was a senior advisor for his advanced department. And then once that came to an end, about 3 days later, I hopped on Joe Biden's campaign, and I was actually helping run a large rally in Cleveland that eventually got canceled about 2 hours before doors to the public due to COVID. And then that was the start of the pandemic. And I eventually jumped on Joe Biden's communications team down in Florida, and it was a wild ride. Communications on campaigns is typically the team that is helping put together the messaging that the campaign puts out on its website, what the candidate's saying to the public and press, and then of course helping manage relationships with the media. And I'm lucky enough to be a part of this incoming administration. I'm going to be a advanced officer within the Department of Homeland Security. And so basically what I will be doing is helping plan, staff, and execute any, both private and public, events or engagements that soon to be, hopefully, Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas of the DHS will be doing. So, yeah, my route, like a few of these folks here, was a bit circuitous. I actually wanted to be a lawyer when I first left Vassar, so I was a paralegal for about 1.5 years. I realized that I didn't necessarily like being behind a desk all day, and I really thrive off working with people, being on my feet, problem solving on the fly. And so I ended up took an internship at the Clinton Foundation because I knew that, I presumed really that Hillary Clinton would be running. And, lucky enough for me, I was right to get to know the right people that helped me join the campaign. And yeah, like I mentioned, the rest was a great ride. So, I'm a little bit different here, where I've gotten a lot of experience on campaigns, and it's certainly a world that I was not very familiar with at Vassar, and it's not something I really considered. And so, if you're someone who is interested in traveling, getting to know different parts of the country, and really, being a problem solver and being thrown into situations that you are not necessarily familiar with, and getting to work and meet new people every single day, I would highly recommend campaigns. They're a fun environment, and you learn a lot about yourself and others while you're doing it. But yeah, that's me. Happy to be here, and happy to be a resource for you guys today and moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Juan. So for the purpose of questions, we would really love to interact with you directly and have you actually ask us the questions. But if you're more comfortable putting them in the chat, feel free to put them in the chat and I'm happy to read them out for the mentors in general. But I think it's a great practice for everybody to get to sort of talk about things and verbalize their question and have a conversation with the mentors directly. That said, why don't I start with one question for the entire panel, and that'll give you an opportunity to start thinking of the questions you might want to ask and open yourselves up for. My question for each of my colleagues on the panel really comes back to the issue of bipartisanship, something that both Tom and I talked about. I know Brooke deals with, Alex deals with, and Juan deals with in not only campaigns, but now he's going to be dealing with it from an agency perspective. But given the way the political climate has shifted and what we just experienced in January, where we had riots at the Capitol, what is the political climate impact on your jobs day to day? What does that do for you, and how do you react to it? And how do you move either beyond it or find a path to deal with the problems that you have to address? And I'm gonna be evil and I'm gonna pick on somebody and I'm gonna go last. So why don't we start with Tom from the law enforcement perspective?
Yeah, so January 6th, from the FBI perspective, I could share all things that I share, just as a disclaimer, it's my own personal opinion, doesn't reflect the views of the FBI, but can talk with you about stuff that's been happening in the public sphere. And it's an all hands on deck perspective. I think this past year has been very challenging for a lot of us. And what I can say is that starting with the beginning of the pandemic, some of the civil unrest that we saw last summer, people were very kind of suspect of the law enforcement presence and perspective, as they should be. We should be critical about our law enforcement officers. We should ask tough questions. But moving over to the bipartisan aspect, you had a lot of one side of the aisle saying that law enforcement should act a specific way to those people. And, certain other side of the aisle, January 6th comes around, says, we should treat these individuals perhaps a little bit differently. For me in law enforcement, with respect to the FBI, the role of the FBI, I really have to give kudos to our Director Ray. I think throughout it all, we've had still a steady and firm commitment to the Constitution and processing and addressing, the crimes that we saw take place in the Capitol. And, frankly, let's be honest, the crimes that took place in places like Portland too, equitably. It's unfortunate that sometimes the work that we do, we try to be non-political in it. I think we do a pretty good job at it. But it affects the work day to day. I work with a lot of individuals who share different political beliefs than myself. I personally I'm a registered Democrat. I'm left leaning, and a lot of my colleagues are not. But when we suit up to go out to do a search warrant, or when we get ready to arrest somebody, it's never looking at their political ideology or anything else like that. We believe very firmly and strongly in First Amendment rights. And it's something that's very challenging, because you kind of look at the line of where does First Amendment free speech cross the line. And I think we saw an example of that on January 6th, when it becomes violent and when it threatens the very institution that, our role as law enforcement officials have been organized to uphold. So it's been busy, without saying too much. It's been super busy. So I'm based out of Delaware. We recently arrested the guys who were carrying the Confederate flag in the Capitol. They were based in Delaware. We've got a lot of other interviews to do. I think that the challenging thing, John, kind of speaking to you on the level of bipartisanship, is law enforcement, I think, is only part of the solution, right? We could arrest a number of people, but if that ideology doesn't change, if that doesn't change, then we're going to kind of see these same problems popping up. So my role in the bipartisan aspect is to work with my colleagues, I think, that have different political perspectives, to say, look, we both are here for justice. We want justice to be meted out equitably. We could talk about our politics, but at the end of the day, we need to treat people like human beings. So I think that in the law enforcement perspective, a lot of my colleagues see people first, and they try to treat people, even individuals that we arrest, with humanity and respect, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. We may disagree with some individuals, and if individuals commit crimes, they should be punished, but they're still people. They still need to be treated humanely.
Alex, I think you might have a really interesting perspective on this, especially I love the fact that you talk about driving good outcomes
Mhm.
with what you do. Could you talk a little bit about this, especially as an advocate, and how politics impact you?
Sure. So it's interesting. I would say there's been uh, overall, for me personally, just a lot of frustration, right? Because the people that I'm ultimately focused on are people who have the deepest need, right? And who have suffered the most as a result directly of the pandemic. And so, we've found ourselves in this perfect storm when it comes to inaction for what people need, where it's the pandemic, it's the related um, COVID crisis, it's the stagnation around action, quick enough action to get direct relief to people. And so from where I sit for the last year, after the Governors Association, we have really been focused. CAP is a progressive think tank. It's nonpartisan, but like a lot of the policy proposals that we advocate around and develop research for are things that typically the Democratic side of the aisle would be pushing forward, right? So we were working in essentially an unfriendly administration, and particularly when you talk about poverty issues, a lot of what has happened or what had happened under the Trump administration were attempts to restrict access to critical programs. So we spent a lot of time developing campaigns. We had one called Hands Off SNAP. SNAP is a supplemental nutrition assistance program, or what used to be known as food stamps, where we were working with a collective of advocacy groups to really push back against a lot of the administrative attacks, things around work requirements, other kinds of restrictions that were put in place to make it harder for people to get food stamps, and really educating people about the importance of it, right? And so we spent some time, when you talk about outcomes, in the context of the pandemic, we've really been spending a lot of time building the economic case for investment in these things, because, for example, food stamps stimulate the local economy. For every dollar, I never get this stat right, but for every dollar invested, there's like $1.71, I think, roughly in return. So putting forward that kind of information with the intention of getting people to drive people to action, right? To do things that we need them to do to make sure people in need have what they desire. So that's such a contrast, though, I have to say, working at CAP from working at a place like the National Governors Association, where I was up until November of 2019. But what the uniting factor in that work and what brought together all governors is a couple of mantras. One, governors get things done, right? They're directly accountable to people. And two, states generally being laboratories of democracy. And so a lot of what I spent my time focused on where I sat at the Governors Association was providing advice around policy changes that could be made to drive good outcomes for children and families. I spent a lot of time focused on the child welfare system. No governor wants to oversee a state where children die as a result of bad placements in foster care, things of that nature. Child death is not the outcome that any governor wants. And so, we worked with Democrats and Republicans on trying to make sure we passed systemic reforms that kept children safe, and kept families together. And so you can sort of see through a lot of this when there's a common factor that unites you and mobilizes you, and protecting children, making sure people have a roof over their head, food on their tables. Those are things that partisanship shouldn't get in the way of. But, in the last year in particular, we've seen a lot of that. And I would say from where I sit now, there's more hope because there's a friendly administration from where we sit that will hopefully help us pass a lot of these things. We're already seeing really positive changes. And so the orientation of my work is shifting from one focused on defense to one that's focused on more what are the kinds of systemic changes we need to drive? What are the opportunities? What are the bold policy ideas we can put forward and advocate behind and make sure that we're supporting members of Congress and allies in the administration around getting passage? So, yeah.
So I think that was truly a really good sort of segue into Juan, and then I'm going to let Brooke and I finish it up together since we both have that congressional component to this. But Juan, you're coming at this from a campaign perspective where you were right in the middle of politics, and I think it's important to get this sort of question out of the way up front in a government and politics panel, because when you're talking about partisanship in a political climate, it really impacts how you do your job and what it's like to do your job and whether your job is stressful. I think coming off of a campaign, you were really hit hard with all of this. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to transition from that political component and now going on to the actual administrative side and how you're going to bridge those gaps?
Sure. Yeah. Let me just real quickly just talk about how, I think the high tension that we've seen and the lack of bipartisanship and sort of the rise of extreme positions within our political atmosphere, how that has had an effect in the campaign world. So, as an advanced staffer, and I actually forgot to mention, I've done a lot of communication. So first, as an advanced staffer, it can be, pretty difficult, for example, to walk into a venue on some pretty neutral ground or an area that is, maybe historically conservative or Republican. And you've got a lot of venues and or vendors that will just straight up not work with you because you are a Democrat. And that wasn't so much the case in 2016. It grew increasingly so, obviously, throughout the general. But this cycle, it was, you had to be very careful about where you went, who you spoke to about what, because often enough, advance, in a way, is a tip of the spear for a campaign. We're sort of, taking on these reconnaissance missions to sort of find out, where we're going to be doing these public events. And of course, taking in, and considering the security measures that you have to have in place now for campaign events, right? In this, hyper partisan atmosphere. So it can definitely make the day-to-day of just site surveys and reconnaissance a lot more difficult, and as well as executing these events. From a communications standpoint as well, right? Because I was a press secretary in Texas for a gubernatorial campaign, and Texas is a very interesting place. And in a lot of ways, 2018 I think really was sort of the breeding ground for a lot of the really mean and inhumane attacks we saw throughout this presidential cycle. And so, you're seeing these statements in the press, or you can ask questions from the press, and you can feel, you're in the position, you have the ability to take on a bit more of a moderate tone in the statement that you put out, right? Or the copy of your tweet, or how you're briefing your principal, right? To respond to a question, right? And so it's I think that in a way, I found myself often to be defensive and very reactionary initially, right? But you have to come to understand that, if 75 million or what have you voted for the other candidate in this last presidential cycle, and those folks aren't necessarily going away, right? And nor should they, right? So I think that we all need to understand that there has to be a future in which we all believe in, that we all work towards, where we can actually sit across the table and have conversations with folks that think differently from us, right? I think that, while at Vassar, I found myself in a bubble, and it was comforting, and it was, and it certainly still allowed you to explore different points of view and perspectives. But it's important to recognize that this world is filled with folks that don't necessarily agree with you, and you have to find a way to work with them. How it'll affect my job in the incoming administration, honestly, I'm curious to know. I think that I will be sort of performing that same sort of advanced role for the secretary, and I will be, in a way, again, the tip of the spear, right? I will be the first person on behalf of the secretary's team that folks will be interacting with. And of course, being in a more official capacity, there will, and of course, also being an agency that is very much in charge of, or at the forefront of law enforcement, right? Which, again, as Tom had mentioned, can certainly give way to more bipartisanship, right? And coordination. So I think that it'll be interesting for folks to see that, yes, we are, of course, DHS is, again, part of that law enforcement community, but we are here to, put forth policies and plans that are a bit more humane, right? And that will be a departure, a pretty strong departure from what has been going on for the last 4 years. And the folks that you usually deal with in law enforcement, as I have found, do in advance, tend to be, they can be a bit more moderate and or on the conservative side of things. right? So yeah, I think that again, I think that it'll be interesting. I really can't speak to how much it'll affect the DHS line of work, right? Because that'll be brand new to me. I've never been in a governing office or public office capacity. So it'll be interesting to say the least.
I look forward to hearing how that sort of plays out for you, Juan, because I think that's going to be fascinating. So you've heard the law enforcement perspective from Tom. You heard an advocacy perspective from Alex. You've heard a campaign and a agency transition perspective from Juan. Brooke and I both have two sides of a coin in dealing on the Hill and with members. Brooke's now based in a state and I'm based in DC, but we both work on policy. And Brooke, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, particularly being on the ground in New York.
Yeah, so nothing depresses me more than this topic. This is the most depressing thing in government right now. Things are crazy in government now. Things are crazy on Capitol Hill. Things are crazy, I'm sure, in the FBI and pretty much everywhere else. This is a very challenging time to be trying to pass laws. It's really, really hard right now to get anything done. And I think you have to be optimistic if you work in government. You have to believe that getting the work done is going to help people and that there's a reason to work really, really hard to get the work done. Right now, I struggle to be optimistic. I really, really do. But that said, I work for a senator who believes passionately in reaching across the aisle. It is the thing she talks the most about when we're all just hanging out and there are no cameras around. It's really been one of the things that she does best on Capitol Hill. So I look to her to find that sort of inspiration, but it's hard right now, guys. It really is. I almost feel like one of the things I want to tell you is that you guys are going to have to change everything. Like your generation, you guys are going to get out there, you're going to make everything better. I believe it. And, I'm really looking forward to that. It's crazy. But look, things will get done in Congress. There will be laws passed and we will do good work. There's no doubt about it. We have an administration now who I think really, really believes in the workings of government. Joe Biden has been described as an institutionalist. He believes in our institutions, believes that our institutions working well is the thing that will make our country work for the most people. And I want to believe in that as well. But it's a difficult time. It really is. This feels like we're on the precipice right now on Capitol Hill. We have an opportunity to really move legislation, to really make a difference. And I honestly think the next 6 months or so are going to be critical, and we'll see what happens. I think that a lot of people on the Hill want to do really good things for the American people. So I think it's going to be okay, but it's a really complicated time right now. As for being in state and not in DC, in some ways, my job is really removed from the sort of chaos in DC right now. I'm able, by being in state, I'm able to really focus on New York institutions that are doing terrific things and that need our help. I can really focus on policy. And the most of what my job is serving as a conduit between between New Yorkers who need things and our boss, the senator who wants to communicate to those New Yorkers and learn from those New Yorkers about what they need and what you should be fighting for. So a lot of my job is reaching out to institutions of all kinds in New York, hospitals, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a tiny little nonprofit that's trying hard to create greenhouses for public school students to learn from and use. And I listen. In normal times, I do a ton of site visits. I meet with people all the time. I see the amazing things that they're doing, and I hear what they need from the federal government. And then I'm able to communicate that to my colleagues in DC and do a lot of brainstorming about how to turn those needs into legislative solutions. So that, I'm still doing that, and that's fantastic. And it's very inspiring to talk to New Yorkers every day who are doing great things. But what can I say? Maybe I'm like the downer of the group, but it's a tricky time right now. John, do you agree? It's crazy.
No, I think it's an extremely tricky time, and especially moving into a 50-50 Senate where we're trying to move policy. I ask this question for the whole panel to sort of raise for all of you as students to think about in terms of government and public service and what it means to be a public servant, to understand that politics impacts everything we do. And there is a tone in this country that stems from politics, that stems from our president, that President Biden is trying to change, that stemmed from former President Trump and how his party was pushing politics. But it's been a tide that's been happening in this country for years. We have been pulling more and more to polar opposites and not really paying attention to the fact that most of the country wants us to legislate and operate and work. And I raised this question for everybody at Vassar to think about why your education is important and why you stepping into politics matters, because at the end of the day, Vassar teaches you to problem solve. That's what I look for when I hire staff. And that's what's needed in public service. We've got one of the world's biggest problems happening right now. How do we bridge the gap from the far left and the far right and move policies that are really important to impact poverty, or policies that are really important to make sure that clean water is addressed for communities, while we have this major political divide that is keeping us apart? How do we bridge that gap? And frankly, you are the generation that is going to have to step in and figure out what that bridge looks like. It's so important that you are interested in government and public service right now, because you're going to have to figure out how to get to a solution. That's what Vassar is teaching you right now. It's not about having the solution. It's about listening. It's about synthesizing, and it's about being part of the solution and really bringing people to the table to make it work. And so my personal opinion, we are at a crazy time, and I spend all day, every day, doing exactly what I'm preaching to you, trying to bridge those gaps and write legislation that works for both sides of the aisle. But it needing you to step in and really move the ball forward is important, and it starts now. And so I hope I can help you in your next steps of your career, and you'll do this for the next generation as well, because frankly, without you, this country is, up the river without a paddle. So I'll stop there with sort of this like big spiel for all of us. And why don't we have some student questions, because it's 1:45 and we're going to be together until 2:20. Is that right, Greg? 2:20.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and then we'll go to breakout rooms, but I'd love to hear from each of you specifically. Hi, Doug. Please jump on in.
Hi, thanks again to all of you for being here, and it's been a really interesting talk so far. And I guess my question relates more to just continuing the discussion about bipartisanship. I'm someone who, obviously being a college student, I'm not that old. So really the only political landscape I've known my whole life is the one we're in right now, kind of. I mean, it's been a super partisan divide, and so I don't really know a time where, you know, there was a lot of working together. And so I found myself a lot of times very disheartened and very like, you know, like, is it even worth putting my time and effort into politics? Because, you know, like, we had a deadly pandemic, and even in that situation, like, we couldn't pass like simple, you know, relief bills and that kind of stuff. And just, you know, I look at something like the Senate filibuster. So it's like, even if you have, you know, your party is in the majority, like, the odds that someone's going to have 60 senators agreeing on something is not that high. So I don't know. I guess my question is like, how do we try and bridge that gap, especially because amongst not just the people in government, but the citizens, there's not really an agreement on what is reality and what is not. Like, I feel like I have friends sometimes that I try to have a, you know, a discussion about politics when we have differing views. And a lot of times it's like, oh, where did you read that? Oh, you read that on CNN or some the New York Times or whatever. That's liberal bias. It's not true. And so it's like, how do you ever come to an agreement with someone if they think that everything you're reading is completely fake, and, you know, the vice versa?
Um, Let me start there, and I'd love any other mentors to sort of pop in on this. Doug, you raised a couple really is it Douglas or Doug? I'm so sorry.
I go by Doug, but either's fine.
Okay. I want to call you what you want to be called. So please, everybody know if I missay your name or I misgender, I don't mean it intentionally. Please, you know, correct me. I'm open to anything. It's very important. Um, Doug, I think the question you asked about understanding moving policy and making changes and how do we bridge this gap, you're talking out of two components. One, you're worried about the filibuster, and the filibuster prevents us from moving policy and getting things done. But that filibuster and protecting the rights of the minority is what makes America great. I want to be very clear about that. Whether or not I agree with the minority, in this instance, the Republicans, because the Democrats have taken control, it is not the point. At some point, the coin's going to flip, and you want your voice to be heard. And the quintessential right of our country is that we all have a voice in our government, and everything we have to say and our opinions and our concerns matter. And I think we need to get back to the fundamental structure of our country of really listening to each other rather than screaming at each other and just saying that I'm right. I know there are flaws in the Democratic platform, just like there are flaws in the Republican platform. Nothing's perfect. We pick a platform that we support because we're trying to make a political decision on what we think is the best path forward. And we may not agree with everything either side, but we have to also remember that we have to be able to talk and compromise and work as one. And it's a tone that starts with you and talking to your friends. And if they've got bias on the articles that you're reading and they're saying that you're just reading CNN and that's a liberal bias, or maybe someone else is reading an article that's coming from Heritage Foundation or Breitbart. I'm sorry, I had a moment where I couldn't think of a conservative paper for a second. You need to hear them out too, and they need to be able to. You need to have a dialogue with them of, okay, well, let's talk about the facts with what they're based on, and let's make a decision together, because maybe they're both wrong in some fashion. Vassar teaches you to, and I keep hitting my desk, so I'm sorry if it's shaking. Vassar teaches you to ask those questions. And that's what's so awesome about your education. I love hiring Vassar grads and giving Vassar grads internships because you ask really tough questions and you really think through what the problem is. That's what's needed in this country right now. It's about getting back to the fundamental root of, okay, just because you say it doesn't mean it's true. Let's go investigate it and get back to source documents and understand it. Alexandra's, I'm sure, got a phenomenal perspective on this because she comes from field work where she saw it firsthand what the problems were. That's why people like Alexandra are so important to the legislative and political process, because they're bringing a real world component rather than just an on paper component. When we're talking about facts, figures, numbers, people being homeless, it may not look as bad as it really is, or it might be way worse on paper than what's really actually happening. We need people who are willing to get out there and do the research and ask those questions. And I can't stress to you enough that bridging the gap starts with that, and you're learning it right now. And I'd like to turn it over to anybody else on the mentors panel that would like to jump in.
Yeah, I just want to jump in quickly. John, I agree 100%. I want to drill down kind of on specifically what Vassar, what impact Vassar had on me and some tangible ways that I kind of got to where I was with respect to, Doug, your question. You know, Vassar is in Poughkeepsie, which is a city unlike any that I've ever lived in before. And there's a wealth of opportunities through the CDO for you to get involved. At my time at Vassar, I worked at the Family Partnership Center, which is in downtown Poughkeepsie, and working with folks who came from a very different population than I did. Whether you do junior year away or junior year abroad, I really encourage you to kind of get out into communities where it doesn't look like where you grew up, it doesn't look like Vassar, and you start having those conversations. And the CDO, I think, is a wonderful resource for you to say, hey, you know, I'm interested in X, Y, and Z, but I would like to have a new and different experience. It's only through kind of talking to people as people with different ideas in a respectful and tolerant manner that I think this global idea of getting past kind of bipartisan divides can really start to chip away. So kind of in the interest of time, I just wanted to leave you with that there are great opportunities just, you know, beyond the gates of Vassar, and turn it over to somebody else.
Yeah, I that is a remark. That's a phenomenal point that Tom just made. And related to what I was going to say is that, you know, yes, you should absolutely do as much as you can to get outside of your comfort zone and live and to be a part of a community that is not yours, right? But that will become yours, and you will become a part of it the more time you spend in it, right? So again, whether that's going abroad or going downtown Poughkeepsie or doing community projects on the weekends, but get outside of your comfort zone and get to know people that do not have the same upbringing, background, interests, right, that you do. Because when you do that, right, you force yourself to come to terms with other people's perspectives, put yourself in their shoes, right, because you are forced to interact with them, right? And you can't just like shake your head and turn around and walk away if you have a disagreement. You have to force yourself, right, to interact with folks that, again, you do not see eye to eye with on, but learn to understand that at the end of the day, it's pretty basic, right? We all want to lead our lives in a safe and secure way. We all want a better future for ourselves. We want to be able to put food on our table. We all have our dreams and our aspirations, and we all eventually probably want a better future for our children and our grandchildren, right? And so understanding what incentivizes and what motivates folks is a really, really helpful way to, again, get to the table and have those conversations. And again, I can't emphasize enough how much Tom is right about doing the legwork to really get outside of your comfort zone and spend some time as a part of a community that is not your own.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think, you know, what you're building there is empathy and compassion. And those are the tools that we really need to get through a lot of the chaos and noise that we hear around us. I think the only other thing I was going to say is that I do feel hopeful. And I particularly when I reflect back on my time at the National Governors Association, because if there was this movement I noticed in policymaking at the local level, and I think it's starting to build up at the national level, to really authentically engage people and their lived experiences. And so I recall doing meetings where, you know, people wanted to hear, for example, from foster youth directly. And these are state legislators, these are secretaries of health and human services, these are people who sit within the governor's office, who have a wide portfolio of a range of issues. And we would often bring these folks to tell their stories. And in doing that, we would train, you know, make sure they're prepared, they're trained in a way to sort of share their story that's not traumatizing them or you know, sort of doing something that's like the opposite or the counter effect of what we want, but like people really hearing their lived experiences and then seeing how policy change or practice change, changing the way that government does something could actually help them. And so, I'm seeing more of that. I mean, there's a concept called human-centered design that comes from probably the for-profit world, but where people really interview, communities and groups and get a sense of what's really going on and asking them what they want, and then designing solutions, right? Or sort of outside of the context of politics that address what people are saying they really need. And I think as I see more of those practices, and I hope that they take off further and that we think about how we do some of that authentic engagement at the national level, we help build and spread empathy and compassion for other people, which is so important.
Is there another question that we could jump in on? Or Doug, did that sort of get at the heart of what you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely got at the heart of it. And, I guess what came up along with that is kind of, I don't know, like I definitely, want to expose myself to, more opinions from people on the other side. And at the end of the day, like I can definitely, compromise on things like, I don't know, taxes or healthcare or something like that. But I feel like, and this is from a liberal perspective, granted, but I feel like there are some issues where it feels like the other side, it doesn't necessarily, I don't know, value human rights or equality sometimes. Like there are certain issues that I'm like, I don't want to compromise on this issue. Like this issue is not up for debate, kind of. So like, how do you
So
bridge
Doug,
that gap,
actually,
especially when there's a bunch of disinformation surrounding it? And
let me just say this, Doug. You don't have to compromise on everything, and nor should you. Your core values are your core values. But there's a difference between compromising on a law and a policy that moves something forward and compromising on who you are and what you believe. And you need to take a step back and learn to separate the two, because every day I go to work and I work on clean water policy, and my value is that everybody deserves clean drinking water. How I get there is in small incremental changes. It's not about suddenly I'm able to pass a law that everybody in the country has free access to water at any time. There are no bills anymore, and that we will do 100% of the purification. That's not going to ever happen in my lifetime, and nor will I think it will ever happen in this country. It's about small incremental changes and philosophical changes and moving people along with you. And they view policy the same way, moving us in small incremental changes in the direction that they think is important. I think they have this, you have to go back to what the core value is with someone that you're talking to. And if the core value is everybody deserves a roof over their heads and that no one should be in poverty, how we get there is two different paths in a lot of cases. And you just have to figure out what the way to get there is and work together to solve the problem. And that's something that I want you to really think about, is there's a difference between core values and legislative initiatives. Can we take another question from the group? Ben? And then Alex, you're next.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm a history major and maybe Japanese major, and I'm wondering, hearing you guys' stories, and I've heard from other people who sort of had similar experiences. It sounds like working in the world of public service, especially if you're doing things on political campaigns or in with political offices, there's a lot of turnover and moving around, because somebody maybe loses re-election, or you decide you want to move on, or somebody's moving on to a place where you don't want to follow them to or whatever. And I know that some careers you expect to be in the same place for like 10 years, and it sounds like public service is not like that. But then also within the job itself, crazy stuff is always happening. Like there's, this January, obviously, there was the Capitol insurrection, there's the inauguration, there's even this crazy GameStop thing. It's like it's like there's a lot going on. So I just like to hear from everyone how they sort of handle that, both the sort of the career changes and then also the crazy stuff that can happen even while you have the same job.
I would just say, Ben, it's maybe not necessarily career changes, because I'd say we've all been in, like for me, for instance, I've been in a legislative career path for 20 years. Maybe my position has shifted within it, or I've moved members, or I've changed jobs, but there's a difference between a career and a job. And I just think about it from that perspective. But you are right, there is a ton of crazy stuff happening. I'd love to hear from other people about their thoughts on how that's impacting them.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. Ben, that's such a good question. I'm going to take the crazy stuff happening part of it. So yes, crazy stuff happens all the time when you work in government and politics, and I'm sure in other kinds of public service as well. One thing that I have found in my career is you have to have two ideas in your head at all times. You have to react day to day to the crazy things that happen. And that is being reactive to the world around you. And you have to have your list of your priorities and your goals, the things that don't change, even though GameStop happens and there's an insurrection at the Capitol. So I find that, every single day we're reacting to things, and that's part of the job. Part of the job, those aren't distractions. Part of the job is, all of a sudden, New York City or New York State is starting to cancel vaccine appointments because they thought they were going to have more vaccines than they do. You need to react to that today. You need to work to fix that problem today. But then so you work on that, but then there is, whenever that settles down, you need to remind yourself that the big goal is getting a vaccine system in place that works for everybody. And it's not just about canceled appointments, it's about something larger. It's about health infrastructure. And so I think it's a juggling act, and it's a balance of those two things all the time. My colleagues help me with that too. We have weekly check-in calls, we have monthly check-in calls, and it's on those calls where we talk about both of those things. Hey, what needs to be solved today? And then, hey, remember that we were going to think about a system that we could start talking to other offices about that might create a health force of volunteers who can be trained in health-related fields and work to deliver vaccines and to go into underserved areas and help people that way. It's both of those things all the time. And that takes some discipline and it takes some practice, but that's what work is like that. It's being able to do those two things. It takes a while, but I think it's really important to think about. It's great that you're thinking about it right now. Yeah.
I think that two-list concept, Brooke, is actually fabulous, because that's basically how I live my life. It's the reactive component and it's the strategy component. And you have to be able to wear two hats at once and do both.
Definitely. Yep.
I want to touch on, Ben, your question about moving around versus being in the same place for 10 years or for your career. For me, I mentioned that I did the Peace Corps right after Vassar. And I think what I would really encourage everybody on this in this session today to think about is, I know when I was a sophomore, I really thought, got to do poli-sci, got to do sociology, got to do law school. and I had a very kind of comfortable trajectory in mind. However, I mean, if you take a step out of it, you all have a very long life to live. You're going to have great careers no matter what you do. And I kind of go back to the comment I made previously. I would really encourage you to kind of take a risk and say, well, you know, what does it look like to live in Iowa for a couple months? Or what does it even look like to go to Japan for a semester abroad? And to kind of move around, you know, there is truth to say, you know, if you want to work in the federal government, DC is a place to do it. But I'll tell you, for the FBI, we have offices in every single, you know, state. Some offices we have multiple offices in various states, you know, and kind of see how it feels to do, you know, water policy on the local level in California versus, you know, in DC. I would really encourage you to be adventurous in the time that you have during the summer for internships, or, you know, right after school, to just see what it looks like to kind of, again, go outside of the comfort zone and see, hey, do I like moving around a lot? I have colleagues and friends who love moving around and following different campaigns. Some people realize they can do it for a couple of years and then get burned out, do a stint, you know, in a city or state or DC, and then, you know, they decide they want to do that for the rest of their lives. So you won't know until you try it, is what I'm getting to. So I really encourage everybody here to kind of try that. It is intimidating. You know, I'm married. I currently live apart from my wife. It's been that way for a couple of years, and it's challenging. But when you try it out, you can kind of work out those difficulties that seem daunting when you're actually in them.
I don't want to cut any mentor off from actually responding to the question. I just want to flag that we've got 10 minutes before the breakout rooms kick in. So just putting a clock on people's minds.
John, why don't we move on to another question then to try to get another one in?
That's a good one. Alex?
Thank you. Yeah, so I noticed all of you have backgrounds just sort of in humanities, and for context, I'm a computer science major, potentially looking at adding history. So I was just wondering if you could talk about if there was relevance for more hard sciences in your fields and what that looked like.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Hands down. Listen, all of you should be like pursuing real knowledge and real content. Like, I have a sociology degree, but I have got background in working in all kinds of different issues, and it took me a long time to build that context. I look for people that actually, like Tom said, went and did water policy on the local level or worked in water treatment plants to work on my teams. Like, having real scientific background, like having a computer science degree is something that I would look for right now if I were talking about, you know, privacy policy and intellectual data security, and like those types of things matter and really influence the way good policy is driven.
Yeah, I'll just jump in from the campaign perspectives. That is like some of the most valuable set of skills that you can have. I mean, campaigns are driven by data, right? Whether that's a publicity campaign on behalf of, you know, a new I don't know, makeup, right? Or you're running for office, right? Data informs strategy, right? So if you're interested in crunching numbers and checking out spreadsheets and noticing trends in voting patterns, right? Data analytics are hugely important for campaigns, for political campaigns, as well as just digital savviness. Right? If you are a whiz on Google Analytics, there will be jobs for you on campaigns because it's all about nowadays, obviously everything, a lot of the outreach on behalf of campaigns is digital, right? So understanding how to reach certain voters with your content online is very important, and targeting that is a huge part of campaigns efforts in trying to win over votes. So yes, there are tons of job opportunities within the campaign world. So absolutely.
And I would just add, in the think tank world, quantitative skills are gold. And, you know, I'm trying to find someone right now who has them because I don't, to do some of my policy work. So it's, you know, we're constantly hiring people in the research space and the advocacy space who have those good quantitative skills and know how to run statistical programs and all the things that I don't know how to do.
Just real quick, I wrote down some notes for myself, and for my Vassar redo, what would I do differently about going to Vassar? I would have taken more quantitatively heavy focused courses. Why? Because STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is super hot right now in the government. If you have familiarity, even on a base level, a lot of us, older individuals are looking for people who have that. So computer science, mathematics, engineering, chemistry, whatever it may be, you'll be golden.
I mean, Alex, I just sent 3 of my staffers to classes at American University, and I got the Senate to pay for them specifically to do data
Yeah.
crunching because I needed them to work on some water policy material that I pulled in from water agencies all across the country because we're doing an oversight project on PFAS and PFOA, which is a chemical that contaminates water all over the United States. And we needed to understand what was and wasn't being done by EPA. And because I couldn't trust the Trump EPA, I have to have my team be able to do it. If I had had you on staff, you would have been handed the project immediately.
Mhm. Guys, I just want to jump in. Maybe we can squeeze in one more question from one of the women here. I think it would be great to hear from you. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I kind of want to put you on the spot.
I love you, Brooke. Sarita?
Hi. So kind of piggybacking off of Alex's question, I'm also a computer science major. I'm specifically interested in like applications of data science in public policy. And so I was wondering, what kind of work have data scientists done for you, if they have done any for you or like within your organization, just because I'd like to see like, it's such a broad field. So I'd like to see what kind of work they've done.
I mean, my profession definitely thrives on data because I do a lot of understanding of needs analysis when it comes to drinking water and wastewater and toxics, contaminations. Having the actual data and have it crunched and understanding how rampant a contamination is, what the relevant levels are from the scientific perspective of what is okay to ingest and not ingest. The data crunching and having hard science work on that, whether it is a scientist actually doing it or a data scientist crunching number sets for me, I use it daily.
And then,
Yeah.
the work, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
No, please.
I was just going to say the work that I mentioned this, people crunching data sets and numbers to understand problems and understand what policy has had an impact is something that happens a lot in the work that I currently do. But I would say at the state government level, there's a ton of data that's collected, administrative data that sits in state government that people are trying to figure out how to use to determine and predict people's involvement in programs, involvement in systems, what are the things that work, what are the things that don't work. And so, so there's a lot of data scientists that work on that do evaluations. A lot of program evaluation is necessary and constantly pulling from folks who have those skill sets outside of even public policy to do that analysis. So I would say there's a lot of opportunity within government with that skill set.
100%. Just briefly speaking, we continually do threat analysis of various different threats on the domestic level, international level, look at different trends of what happens where and what things look like when they do happen. So taking that data, the quantitative piece, and manipulating it for a digestible kind of high level audience is something that the FBI uses on a daily basis. And it's the bread and butter of our reports. It's how we get the information out. And I think it's how, to answer Doug's initial question, how we kind of get beyond that bipartisan, this is a truth versus that is a truth. When you're a data scientist and know how to present factual science-based data, it's going to make government and public service a lot smoother and a lot more bipartisan, I think.
The U.S. Congress has a research division that's like this secret that is absolutely incredible called the Congressional Research Service. John, I'm sure you know all about it. Tom, it sounds like you do as well. So they are researchers, analysts, data scientists, everything you can think of, who work for the Congress as a whole. They're nonpartisan, and their job is to help members in Congress and their staff understand tough issues and understand the data in order to make legislation that really works because there's data behind it. And they're the smartest people on Capitol Hill. And if you're doing a bill that has to do with water treatment, and let's say you don't know the first thing about it, they're the first people that you call. They write these magnificent reports that you can read. You can also hop on the phone with them and say, can you just explain water treatment to me? And they will. It's just amazing. So that's another, I mean, you should totally work for CRS. They're great.
And not even just that, the Government Accountability Office.
Yes.
GAO, you
Mhm.
know, the Congressional Budget Office,
Mhm.
their data analytics, it may not sound like there's a lot of data behind what we do. There is an exorbitant amount of data behind
Yeah.
what we do.
Yeah.
Like I live, eat, and breathe data crunching. And like it is so important. I can't even begin to stress this to you. In my first 2 years on Capitol Hill, I took 4 night classes to specifically learn how to do accounting because I needed additional understanding of how the federal budget was crunched so that when I was reading it, I could actually make informed policy recommendations because I was working on the appropriations committee.
Hmm.
Like those skill sets are so critical.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
Do we have any other questions before we break off into the smaller rooms? Anything's game. If you don't want to ask us about this, you want to just ask us, how did we get our job? Anything you want to ask us, we're happy to answer it.
What our favorite food item was at the ACDC as I knew it.
Oh, I lived out at the vegan station. I loved that thing.
That's where I had my first seitan steak at the vegan station, barbecue seitan steak. I'm not a vegan, but man, it was good.
It is good.
I think maybe it's breakout room
Did
time.
Claire have a question?
Claire, it looked like you had a question.
Oh, I just sort of had a question about, so I'm a biochemistry major. And I had a question just about, like, when you leave Vassar, sort of like popping this Vassar bubble, how did you sort of adjust to life? Did you like find mentors? What did you do in order to sort of react to a completely different world than you had lived in at Vassar?
Oh my God, it's so hard. It's really, really hard. It was traumatic. It was hard, hard, hard. First of all, I made so many mistakes that now, I mean, I really felt like I made all of my decisions right after Vassar based on fear and fear alone. Like I thought maybe I'd want to go to law school, but I kind of couldn't even explain why. And I worked as a paralegal for a year while I tried to figure it out. If I could go back, I would have done something completely fun and adventurous and amazing before law school. I didn't. I was just so scared. It was hard. And for me, I remember I was a singer, I was a flute player, and I was a poet. And all of a sudden I was in this world where it was really hard to access all of those things that I loved. And I was sort of like a maniac trying to find a poetry class I could take at the 92nd Street Y, just sort of trying really hard to just build a life that felt as much like Vassar as possible. It's a tough transition and it takes time. Everybody does it, but it's hard. I would say be adventurous, take a deep breath and give yourself some time to figure it out and just do something crazy, whatever it is. Join the Peace Corps, Tom. Do something adventurous and crazy and take a deep breath, give yourself some time. And take a poetry class, Second Street One.
The only thing I'd add to that is find yourself somebody that, whether they're your career path or they're not your career path, that you can always just pick up the phone and call and have a heart-to-heart conversation with, because it's so important to have shared experiences and to learn from each other's mistakes. You know, Claire, I would encourage you to get Brooke's phone number and just talk to her, because like I'm happy to talk to any of you if you ever want to talk to me. Like just learn from us, and you know, and then do the same thing for the next group. You know, we want to be your friend, we're all part of the same community. You can't be shy to ask for that. Getting a cup of coffee not only doesn't cost us anything, it's paying us because we get to spend time with you and reconnect with an institution that matters to us. And we want to help you. So like, it's not a big deal to ask a Vassar alum to be your friend because we already are.
Yeah, hey, and I'll just agree with what folks have responded to your question with Claire, but I would say that see experiences that don't necessarily check a box, right? Or it's not as clear to you that you're going to be picking up like a hard and fast skill, or don't force yourself to take a job just because it has a salary and it's in New York or LA or Chicago, right? Like an experience again that you're going to be getting yourself out of your comfort zone. And again, living and breathing and getting to know a different community than your own is super important, right? And it's also about personal growth, right? Aside from professional growth, and those can be one and the same, right? So what Tom did, going to the Peace Corps, that's something that I regret not doing, right? Or if there's a language that you didn't end up studying at Vassar, but you would really like to explore, like it's Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Spanish, French, just go do that, right? Because you're not only gonna learn that language and live in that foreign country, or move to California or Nevada or Wyoming and do a community project or work on a farm, but it's going to be an experience that again you're going to learn a lot about yourself. And one thing that is also super important, but it's super important to make these mistakes because you also learn and recognize what you don't like to do, right? And what you do not want to do in the future, right? Whether or not that's a particular job or the MO of a job. I know that the life is sucked out of me when I'm at my desk, at my computer screen all day. I just cannot do that. I need a job that forces me to be up on my feet, working with people, right? And so that's what I learned when I was a paralegal. I had a phenomenal time, made a lot of good friends, and have some folks that I still keep in touch with. And while I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer and I felt like it was a step back or a detour, it was very valuable in learning that type of work, not only that I didn't necessarily want to be a lawyer in big law and corporate law, but that type of work, right, the day in, day out that I would be doing was not what I wanted. So that should also be part of your experience, getting to know what you don't want to do.
One thing I do want to add though, because I had an experience coming to Vassar from a low income family, and I did have to make a lot of decisions based on finances because I had to have a job. I couldn't just choose to do something where I wasn't making a salary because I paid for college myself. I paid my mom's contribution as well. There's paths to being able to make those mistakes. And you should relish in the experiences that you have at Vassar. And sometimes we do have to make decisions based on money. And that's just, it's a reality of the world we live in because it's called a global economy and you have to pay for rent. But don't let that be what stops you from making a decision about following your heart, because make the decision and then let's come up with a strategy or reach out to career development office or reach out to an alum that works in the field and they can help you figure out how to make that dream work for you. I had an alum that was wonderful to me who worked on Capitol Hill. And I went through a period when my mom had cancer where I wasn't sure if I could afford to stay working in public service. And I knew I needed to take care of her. She let me stay in her basement apartment and charged me ridiculously low rent just because I was a Vassar alum. People will help you make your dream come true, okay? And just figure out what the dream is and then ask for the help, because that's the thing you can't be afraid is asking for it.